I'm Mike Graham, and this is Talk TV, and it's time for Putin's War, our weekly look at what's been happening in Ukraine, what's been happening around the world, and exactly what is going on in Russia with Vladimir Putin. I'm joined, as ever, by Hugh Andree, our military strategist, former military man, who keeps his eye on all of these things. Putin's continuing to try and freeze Ukraine into submission, Hugh. What's been happening this week?
Yeah, so since the dramatic withdrawal out of Kherson in mid-November, fierce fighting seems to have been continuing to the south and the east, but we are now seeing the real start of the cold weather season in Ukraine. And when I say it's cold, it's averaging between sort of 0 degrees and -5.
Yeah.
That's before that's before you add any wind chill, which takes it down to -10. But as the Ukrainian people know, this is only the start of their winter. And what I mean by that is it's not unnormal for the temperatures to drop to -20, especially if you get what's called a bora, which is a northeasterly wind which comes in from Siberia, which is absolutely freezing. And that makes life really hard if you're a combat soldier on the ground, especially in an infantry type role up front. The ground's freezing, your kit and equipment often freezes.
And if you're in that sort of place, because people will know how cold that feels, but they won't know what sort of shelter you have as a soldier. What sort of shelter do you have? Yeah,
well, I mean, there are armoured personnel carriers, but to be fair, having travelled in them, they tend to act like ovens in the summer and freezers in the winter. And a lot of the troops, especially as we mentioned around the Dnipro River, there's trenches. Yeah, the tempo has really dropped now. As you said, Putin's strategy now will be very much, aiming to freeze Ukraine into submission, as James cleverly quoted just this week. But those trenches will be waterlogged; they'll freeze up. It's really quite unpleasant, and I think this is where the alliance is concentrating so heavily on making sure that the Ukrainian soldiers have the correct kit and equipment in order to...
Because I was talking to a friend of mine who's been in Poland the last few days, and it's apparently snowing, quite a lot of snow on the ground there, so there will be presumably snow on the ground.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, as the Foreign Secretary is talking about, freezing Ukraine into submission is really all about hitting their electric power plants, their power infrastructure, and there have been waves of missiles going into those sites. And I believe at one point last week, all 4 of their nuclear sites were off-grid and not providing power, but have since been reconnected. So it doesn't make life easy, either for the armed forces there or indeed for the people of Ukraine.
No, of course. And in terms of Russia's sort of military strategy, if you like, aside from that, they've all gone a bit quiet, haven't they? They've sort of denied that.
They have.
Of course, they're going to withdraw from that nuclear complex.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, following a sort of string of successes the Ukrainians had in the south, the Kremlin did put an announcement out this week to sort of dampen down any thoughts that they might be withdrawing from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear complex. And that complex just seems to have careered from one problem to another. We know that the generators all been cycled down. The nuclear plant itself provides 20% of Ukraine's electricity, so it's extremely important. But I know the reactors have been all effectively cycled down because there's a great deal of concern about the site being hit.
Yes.
And in fact, just this week, when the head of the International Atomic Agency he gave an interview for CBS. I think it was on Monday. Rafael Grossi, literally within minutes of that interview, 10 missiles struck around the complex.
Really?
Yeah.
So they're paying attention to what the media are saying then?
They are, and that's quite worrying. Grossi actually tried to suggest that they have an area a demilitarized safe zone around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear complex, which both the US, the alliance, and indeed Ukraine all backed. But for some reason, the Kremlin didn't buy into that. They didn't feel it was appropriate.
Okay. And what about the nuclear arms control talks, which I didn't know were supposed to be happening with the US, but apparently they are supposed to be happening with the US, and they're now not.
Yeah, that's a really interesting piece of news that I hadn't picked up on. I was passed the information from a headquarters in Europe, but effectively this is the START treaty, which has been around for some years now. It's the only agreement left regulating the world's two largest nuclear powers, that of Russia and the United States. There was supposed to talks were supposed to have been opened in Cairo on Tuesday, but at the last moment the Russians unilaterally pulled out. They haven't said that they won't take part. They just want the date to be postponed. President Biden was very keen for there to be dialogue, which is quite right and understandable, especially after all the saber rattling that has been coming out of Russia and Ukraine, to be fair. And what it really does, it actually allows Russia and Moscow and Washington to inspect nuclear sites in one another's country.
Right.
Effectively looking at where deployed intercontinental range missiles are kept.
Well, it's not something you'd want to give up on, really, is it?
No, absolutely not. And the agreement is running, I think, for another 3. I think it's got another 2 or 3 years to run, and then that's why they want to start talks now to renew and extend the agreement. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the last couple of years, the inspections haven't taken place.
Yes, of course. Which you'd have to say probably not the safest way to proceed. Hugh, thank you very much indeed. Hugh Andree there with an update on what's been happening in the world this week when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to Putin's war. We'll have more same time next week.